Hey everyone, and welcome to This Explainer. Today we are diving headfirst into an absolutely wild story from the Buzzley. We're looking at a narrative that completely defies expectations. We are talking about a full-blown melodrama packed with closely guarded secrets, massive deception, and the kind of intense family drama that is literally going to keep you guessing until the very end. So, buckle up, because the facts in this case move fast, and you will not see this coming.
Right out the gate, I want you to picture the sheer impossible insanity of this scenario. You're a grieving husband. You are standing there, you've just buried your wife, and then, through your tears, you look up and see the absolute unthinkable. The person you just buried is standing right there. This is exactly where our story begins. Part 1. The impossible sighting.
Okay, so to truly grasp just how crazy this is, we need to ground ourselves in the raw emotional reality of the moment. We are at the immediate aftermath of a horrific car crash that claimed the life of a woman named Mary. She left behind her husband, Ted, and their 15-year-old son, Rick. Now, Ted is doing what any parent would try to do. He's actively trying to swallow his own immense grief just to be a pillar of strength for his teenage boy. They're standing beside a freshly lowered coffin. The dirt is being poured, the tears, completely real. The well-meaning condolences from friends, totally real. There is absolutely zero reason for Ted to suspect that this funeral is anything other than a tragic final goodbye to the love of his life.
But then, the chilling moment happens. As the crowd starts to slowly disperse, Ted spots something way out in the distance. It's a silhouette of a woman wearing a black dress. Now, at first, he figures his mind is just playing cruel tricks on him, right? A grief-induced hallucination. But as he pushes his way through the lingering crowd to get a closer look, the woman turns to face him. And it's Mary, his dead wife. The second she realizes she's been spotted, she completely bolts. She sprints to a black car, slams the door, and speeds away, leaving Ted just standing there in a cloud of dust without even a license plate number to track.
Part 2. Following the clues. Look, I think most people in that situation would simply collapse and assume they'd completely lost their minds. But Ted doesn't collapse. Instead, he instantly shifts from a paralyzed, grieving widower into a relentless, determined detective. He absolutely has to prove to himself that he's not going crazy. As the dust settles from that fleeing car, a single piece of paper flutters to the ground. It's a receipt from a gas station located 80 miles away. Ted doesn't even hesitate. He immediately drives there. He shows a photo of Mary to the station attendant, a woman named Mrs. Lilly, who casually looks at it and remarks, "Oh yeah, that's Carla. She moved in about a week ago." Following Mrs. Lilly's directions, Ted tracks this mysterious Carla all the way down to a room at a rustic little place called Audrey's Motel.
Just try to imagine the kinetic, nervous energy of this exact moment. Ted knocks on that motel room door, his heart absolutely pounding out of his chest. The peephole goes dark. He knocks again, a little louder this time. Suddenly, the door flies open, and the woman inside rushes straight into his arms. Instantly, Ted knows. He smells her familiar perfume, he feels the warmth of her skin, he hears the unmistakable sweetness of her voice, and he realizes, with absolute undeniable shock, that his wife, Mary, is 100% alive.
"Darling, I'm truly sorry. Take a second to let those tearful first words actually sink in." On one hand, Ted is experiencing this pure, unadulterated joy that his wife isn't dead, but that immense high is immediately crushed by the crushing reality of this massive deception. Because if Mary's standing right here, alive, and hiding out in a random motel, who on earth is buried in that coffin?
Part 3. The Twin Sister Twist.
Boom! There it is, the jaw-dropping twist that finally answers our impossible question. Mary had a twin sister named Paris. Let that sink in. This is a massive revelation that Ted is hearing for the very first time in their entire relationship, and it fundamentally shatters the whole landscape of their marriage and the tragedy they literally just experienced.
And this really exposes a deeply, deeply toxic family dynamic. On one side, you have Mary, the responsible one, the sister desperately trying to heal from her traumas and just focus on building a good life for her family. And then, on the other side, you have Paris, a profoundly troubled individual, a serial fraudster who it turns out had just been released from prison. According to the source, Paris had recently shown up at Mary's office, aggressively demanding money and straight up threatening her. Mary had basically spent her entire life trying to clean up Paris's chaotic messes, but this time, the stakes were entirely life-altering.
Part 4. The Fatal Car Crash.
Okay,
Let's piece together the chaotic timeline of the crash itself. Mary was sitting in the passenger seat while Paris was driving. They were fiercely arguing over some petty, unresolved childhood issue. Well, Paris completely lost her temper, and as a result, lost total control of the vehicle. The car crashed violently. Mary vividly recalls the horrifying sound of crushing metal and flying shards of glass. And when Mary finally came to, dazed and terrified, she checked on her sister on the other side of the debris, only to realize that Paris had already stopped breathing.
So here is the crucial turning point. It's all about Mary's sheer panic in the aftermath. With her husband Ted halfway across the world on a business trip in Shanghai, Mary felt entirely isolated. She was absolutely terrified of being blamed for the accident, terrified of the police digging in and discovering the massive extortion payments she had been making to her sister, and completely terrified of being dragged down into Paris's criminal underworld. So, she called 911, walked away from the wreckage, went straight to a bus station, and left town. She allowed the entire world and her own family to believe that she was the one who died in the driver's seat.
Part 5. The ultimate blackmail. Now, this brings up a glaring, massive question. What kind of leverage could Paris possibly have had over Mary to extract all that money in the first place? Lean into the suspense here with me for a second. Because Mary wasn't just paying Paris out of some sense of twisted sisterly guilt. No, Paris had a weapon, a secret so devastating that it rendered Mary completely powerless, essentially forcing her to comply with these endless financial demands. A secret she had kept completely hidden from her husband Ted for over a decade.
And it is a truly heartbreaking truth. Rick, the 15-year-old boy mourning so deeply at the funeral, the boy Ted raised from birth and loves as his own flesh and blood, is actually not biologically Ted's son. And Paris was the only other person in the entire world who knew about it.
Let's look at exactly how this secret came to be. Years ago, Ted and Mary had a massive, relationship-altering fight that resulted in a 6-month separation. During that really vulnerable time apart, Mary reconnected with an old ex-boyfriend. While Paris being Paris, she did the math and figured out that Rick's biological father was actually that ex-boyfriend, not Ted. And this past infidelity, it provided Paris with the ultimate weapon for constant agonizing blackmail, a toxic situation that led directly to the confrontation in the car and ultimately the fatal crash.
Part 6. Forgiveness and moving forward. So we really need to explore how Ted even begins to process this ultimate multi-layered betrayal. I mean, we're talking about a fake death, a secret twin sister, and a secret child. But in a pretty remarkable twist of empathy, instead of simply walking away from the marriage in a blind rage, Ted actually looks inward. According to the source material, Ted knew exactly what it was like to stray outside the bounds of marriage because he was actually guilty of it himself in the past. And it's this shared guilt, this mutual imperfection, that allows him to actually understand and empathize with Mary's terrible mistakes. It paves a highly unconventional but very real path toward forgiveness.
But look, forgiveness does not mean you just get to skip out on the consequences. The aftermath of all this is incredibly messy. Mary has to step up and face the severe legal and familial fallout of her extreme actions to finally wipe her slate clean. She officially surrenders to the police, she tells the absolute unvarnished truth in a court of law, and, undoubtedly the hardest part of all, she sits down with her 15-year-old son Rick and tells him the truth about his parentage. And through all of these agonizing, stressful legal battles, Ted and Mary make the tough choice to actually live apart for a full year just to heal and process everything.
Which brings us to the conclusion of this incredibly wild narrative. 1 year later, on the exact anniversary of the fatal car crash, Ted and Mary meet up. And in a highly poignant reunion, they meet at the very place this unbelievable journey began, a graveyard. Standing over Paris's grave, finally letting go of all their pent-up resentments and crushing guilt, they hold hands, ready to give their deeply complex love story another shot.
So I really want to leave you with this final provocative thought. After all the tangled lies, the secret twins, the decades of blackmail, and the exhausting legal battles, ask yourself where your own boundaries lie. Could you actually find the empathy to forgive a faked death, a secret child, and a fake funeral, all for a second chance at love? It's a fascinating question that really ties this whole melodramatic explainer together. Thank you so much for joining me today, and as always, keep questioning the impossible